3 a.m., he goes into demonic sleep and he leaves the body. Go and use him.
Maybe you don't realize it, but waking up at 3 a.m. is not just a coincidence. Millions of people ignore this spiritual call, and that can come at a high price, even costing their own spiritual freedom. Like James Kawalya, I too once lived in darkness. When I was immersed in the occult, I saw how the forces of darkness operated at 3 a.m. That hour was strategic for us. Many times we were instructed to perform specific rituals because we knew the spiritual gates were open. It was the perfect time to negatively influence lives and destinies without people even realizing it. Today I want to share my testimony of deliverance from the world of darkness and explain to you why God wakes people at that hour. He calls his people to act, intercede, and combat the evil forces that operate while the world sleeps. My name is Elias Okello, and I lived in the occult for 15 years. Today, at 40 years old, I am a pastor, dedicating my life to helping people understand the spiritual realm and how God acts in a special way at 3 a.m. I am not here to scare you, but to reveal truths that many ignore, which can transform your spiritual life. I grew up in Kampala, Uganda, in a humble village surrounded by spiritual traditions that, to many, seemed normal. My family followed practices that blended religion and the occult. My father was known as a respected healer, someone people sought out when faced with challenges that neither science nor traditional faith could solve. From a young age, I was exposed to rituals and ceremonies that, at the time, I believed were normal. In my teenage years, I began to stand out for my curiosity and ability to memorize the chants and steps of rituals. My father said I had a special gift. At 15, I was initiated into deeper rituals, and that was when my destiny began to change. I felt powerful, but at the same time, there was always an unease deep inside me. In my youth, I was no longer just an apprentice. I conducted rituals myself. People came from far away seeking solutions. I remember a woman named Akila who cried desperately because her husband had left her. I offered to perform a ritual to bring him back. It worked, or at least it seemed to. But soon after, I learned that her husband had returned only to abuse her before leaving her again. That profoundly marked me. I began to realize that the power I thought I controlled not only created more chaos in people's lives, but was also destroying my own. By the time I was 25, I was deeply entrenched in the occult. My nights were consumed with rituals, and my days were filled with a constant sense of emptiness. It was always at 3 a.m. that the most intense rituals occurred. We knew that hour was crucial, a portal to the spiritual world. We believed that at that time we could access forces that were otherwise out of reach. I watched lives being manipulated and destinies altered, but at the same time I felt that something was profoundly wrong. It was during a trip to consult another spiritual leader that I had a car accident. I was alone on a deserted road, trapped in the wreckage, in such intense pain that I thought it was the end for me. I remember looking up at the sky and for the first time, calling out to God, not to the spirits I used to invoke, but to the God my mother spoke of in the sermons she listened to on the radio. God heard me. I was rescued by a man named Musa, who happened to be a pastor. Not only did he help me physically, but he also visited me in the hospital and began to pray for me. Each prayer seemed to dissolve part of the chains that kept me bound. When I was discharged from the hospital, Musa invited me to his church. At first I went out of courtesy, but little by little something inside me began to change. The turning point came one early morning when I woke up at 3 a.m. with an inexplicable heaviness in my heart. At that moment, I clearly heard an inner voice saying, "Get up and pray." I didn't know how to pray, but I repeated the words Musa had taught me. "Lord, set me free. I am yours now." That was when the transformation began. Today, looking back, I clearly understand why 3 a.m. holds such profound significance. Before, I used that hour to destroy lives, but now I know that God wakes his people to intercede, watch, and fight spiritually. The difference between the man I was and the man I am now is like night and day. The young man who sought power found peace. The man who manipulated lives now intercedes for them. Now, as a pastor, I dedicate my life to teaching people that waking up at 3 a.m. is not just a coincidence, it's a call. God didn't give up on me, even when I was lost in darkness, and He won't give up on you either. If He could transform me, He can transform anyone who seeks Him. The 3 a.m. hour carries a spiritual significance that goes far beyond a mere coincidence. In the Bible, we see numerous references to the importance of the early morning as a time for watchfulness, prayer, and connection with God. In Ephesians 5:14 we read, "Awake, O sleeper, rise up from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." This verse is not merely about physical awakening, but a spiritual call. It invites us to be alert, to rise from spiritual inertia, and to stand as God's soldiers ready to act. Another powerful example is found in Psalm 91:5-6, which states, "You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness." These words remind us that even when darkness surrounds us, God is our protection. He calls us into battle to cry out for His help and protection against the evil forces operating in the darkness. When we wake up at 3 a.m., it's as if God is calling us to step into this spiritual field. He wakes us up to intercede, connect with Him, and remain attentive to the messages He wants to reveal. This is where we need to learn how to discern between dreams and divine messages. Often God uses dreams to communicate with us. In Job 33:15-16, it is written, "In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on people as they lie in their beds, He may speak in their ears and terrify them with warnings." However, it's important to understand that not every dream is a divine message. Sometimes dreams may simply reflect our subconscious or even be attempts by the enemy to sow fear and confusion. The difference lies in spiritual discernment. A divine message brings clarity, peace, and direction, even if it serves as a warning. On the other hand, a dream that doesn't come from God often leads to confusion, fear, or unrest. I've experienced this firsthand. When I was involved in the occult, I knew that the enemy used dreams to manipulate and deceive. That's why when you wake up at 3 a.m., you should ask God, "Lord, is this from you? What do you want me to do?" This moment is crucial for meditating, praying, and seeking understanding. When God wakes us at this hour, He's not just calling us to hear His voice. He's also alerting us to spiritual cycles that need to be broken. These cycles, whether positive and established by God or negative and created by the enemy, profoundly shape what happens in our lives. When I was in darkness, I knew that 3 a.m. was the ideal time to establish negative cycles. Manipulating destinies, sowing confusion, and hindering lives. But what the enemy plans for destruction, God can use for restoration. God wakes His people at 3 a.m. to intercede, transform spiritual realities, and break the patterns the enemy tries to impose. These cycles can be subtle, repetitive failures, blockages in important areas of life, or even recurring nightmares. But it is in this context that the early morning becomes a battlefield where victory can be won. When we respond to this call, we act against forces that previously went unnoticed. I remember a young man who came to me in desperation. He was trapped in a spiritual cycle of failure. Everything in his life seemed to stall at the last moment, always following terrible dreams that occurred at 3 a.m. Recognizing the pattern, we began to pray together daily at that time. It took weeks, but the persistence in prayer brought a liberation that changed his life. Today, he lives a new reality, free from the chains that once bound him. This transformation showed me that praying at 3 a.m. is not just an act of faith, but a powerful spiritual weapon. When I was in the occult, I saw how darkness operates at this hour. Now, with God, I see how He gives us authority to break these cycles and establish a new path. If you've noticed negative cycles in your life, don't ignore God's call at 3 a.m. He is calling you to fight and win. And many times, God uses this moment not only for prayer, but also to communicate through dreams. I clearly remember how, even when I was in darkness, dreams revealed more than they appeared to. It's during the early morning when the mind is quieter that the spiritual realm becomes accessible. God uses this opportunity to deliver clear and profound messages to our spirits. In Job 33:15-16, the Bible teaches us that God speaks through dreams and night visions. These divine messages are meant to guide, correct, or warn us. But how can we discern what comes from God? The difference lies in the impact. A divine message brings peace and clarity, even if it's a warning, while a nightmare generates fear and confusion. So, when you wake up with a dream, especially at 3 a.m., don't ignore it. Immediately record every detail: people, places, symbols, and emotions. Then, take it to God in prayer, asking Him to reveal its meaning. For years, I saw how dreams were manipulated in the occult, but now I know that God uses these messages to guide us toward His will. The next time you wake up at this hour, be attentive. Reject any negative influence, as Psalm 91 teaches, and seek to discern what God wants to communicate. Dreams are bridges between the physical and the spiritual, and when we align our lives with God's will, they become precious guides on our journey. He always has something important to tell us. We just need to be willing to listen. When God calls us to wake up at 3 a.m., it's not just for an isolated moment of prayer, but to establish a consistent pattern of seeking Him. It is in this continuous commitment that we witness true transformations in our spiritual lives and everything around us. Consistency in prayer is a powerful weapon against the enemy's attacks and a key to accessing God's promises. Creating a prayer pattern means dedicating a fixed time every day to be in God's presence, especially at strategic times like 3 a.m. This practice not only strengthens our connection with Him, but also breaks negative spiritual cycles and opens doors to blessings and deliverance. And I remember the story of James Kawalya, who decided to intercede for a young man trapped in a terrible spiritual cycle. He prayed for him every day at 3 a.m. for 50 consecutive days. At first, it seemed like nothing was happening. The young man remained oppressed, falling into an almost supernatural sleep during the prayers. But James stayed firm, knowing that persistence was the key. After 49 days, something incredible happened. The young man finally woke up spiritually, completely freed, and described feeling a peace he had never experienced before. This story is not only inspiring, but also teaches us something profound. Spiritual patterns, whether positive or negative, directly impact our lives. When we create a consistent prayer cycle like James did, we establish a covenant with God, telling Him that we trust His will and won't give up until we see His promises fulfilled. Whatever area of your life feels stagnant, relationships, health, finances, or spiritual growth, establishing a prayer pattern can make the difference between remaining trapped in negative cycles or experiencing a new reality. It doesn't have to be something grand at first. Start with a fixed time, even if it's just 15 minutes, and increase as God strengthens you. The important thing is to be faithful and not give up. Consistency in prayer demonstrates our faith and perseverance before God. In Luke 18:1-8, Jesus teaches us about the persistent widow who didn't give up until she received justice. That same determination is what we need to bring to our spiritual lives. The enemy wants to discourage us and make us give up, but every time we return to our place of prayer, we reaffirm that He has no power over us, and that victory is already ours through Christ. So when God wakes you up at 3 a.m., or any other time He places on your heart, see it as an invitation to create a pattern of seeking Him. It's in the daily consistency, the perseverance, and the intimacy with God that miracles happen and spiritual chains are broken. God is faithful and honors those who seek Him with consistency. Consistency in prayer, especially at 3 a.m., is not just a powerful practice, but also a response to God's call to actively participate in His work in the spiritual realm. However, this time is surrounded by many myths that create confusion and even fear. Therefore, it's important to separate truth from speculation to understand the real purpose of this moment. Many people associate 3 a.m. with what they call the witching hour or the hour of darkness, believing it's exclusively a time when the enemy operates. While it's true that evil spiritual forces try to act during this time, it is much more than that. At 3 a.m., God also awakens His people to watch, pray, and intercede. This time does not belong to darkness. It's a strategic moment when spiritual portals are opened, and heaven is attentive to the prayers of those who cry out. In the Bible, night watches are mentioned as times of communion with God and preparation for great divine interventions. In Exodus 14:24, we see that during the watch of the night, the Lord looked down on the Egyptian army and intervened for his people. In Mark 1:35, Jesus rose early in the morning to pray, showing that this time is an opportunity to seek intimacy with the Father and align our lives with his will. Theologically, the early morning is seen as a time of transition between night and day, a symbol of new opportunities and spiritual renewal. The spiritual portals open at this time represent a chance to break barriers, receive revelations, and establish covenants with God. The enemy tries to use this same window for his own purposes, but when we respond to God's call, we turn this moment into a battlefield of victory. Therefore, don't view 3 a.m. as a time of terror, but as a divine invitation to participate in something much greater. It's a moment of watchfulness, where you can not only protect yourself from spiritual attacks, but also intercede for others, align yourself with God's purpose, and experience his presence deeply. When you understand the truth about this time, fear gives way to faith, and the early morning becomes a time of transformation and spiritual power. When we understand that 3 a.m. is a divine invitation for prayer, intercession, and transformation, we realize it's not a moment to ignore. God may be trying to speak directly to you, reveal something important, or use you to impact other lives. This call is unique and full of purpose. Don't waste this opportunity to connect with him more deeply. Think about it. Every time you wake up at this hour and choose to respond to God's call, you're building a spiritual habit that has the power to transform not only your destiny, but also the lives of those around you. Praying daily, even if only for a few minutes, and being vigilant to his directions are practices that can bring peace, clarity, and deliverance to areas of your life that may feel stagnant. If this message has touched you and brought understanding, I invite you to support this work by clicking the Super Thanks button. This helps us continue to share messages like this with more people and share the truth that transforms lives. Before we close, I want to leave you with a powerful reflection. God never wastes a call. When he wakes you up at 3 a.m., he is offering you the chance to take a stand, fight spiritually, and draw closer to him in a unique way. Don't ignore this call. Your response can change the course of your life and open doors you never imagined were possible. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Sometimes, all a person needs to begin a journey of transformation is a simple nudge. Together, we can bring God's light to those still in darkness. May the Lord bless and strengthen you in your spiritual walk, and remember, responding to God's call not only transforms you, but also those around you. See you in the next video.